What's going on, y'all? Thanks for checking in with Callie. Please like, subscribe if you haven't. So I'm here to say this now. I gotta say this because I'm not gonna say this really shocked me, but it really has kind of overwhelmed me a little bit simply because of the consistency so far and just asking this player to step up, and he stepped up in a big way. I gotta give Norman Powell a shout out. Norman Powell has been terrific for the Clippers since inserted in the starting lineup. And the way he's playing right now, he is a better number 2 option than Paul George ever was with the Clippers. With Paul George flaking out in the bubble, playoff P, way off P, with him not showing up in the latest playoff performance, against the Dallas Mavericks in last year's playoffs, where he laid an egg along with James Harden, but James Harden not looked at so much because he wasn't the second option. Paul George was the second option. And even though Kawhi was out, with James Harden, Paul George, and Russell Westbrook at the time, that should have been good enough to compete better against the Mavericks and or beat them in a 7-game series. But Paul George, being Paul George, not showing up, not playing the way he should, half-assing the way he's looking right now in Philadelphia, actually, the reason why they're like 1-6, it just raises eyebrows. And you look at the way Norman Powell is playing, this guy is averaging 25 points a game right now, shooting 51% from the field. Like the other night, he was shooting like 37% from 3, like totality. It could be different a little bit now since it's been a couple nights since then, but he's shooting 51% from the field, averaging 25 points a game. This is the second star player that Kawhi Leonard really needs. Because even though Norman Powell really comes off the bench because, he just kind of like chooses to, actually, but he can actually be inserted in the starting lineup with Kawhi Leonard and James Harden when Kawhi comes back. Because Kawhi can count on Norman Powell most nights. Even if you couldn't count on Norman Powell most nights, it wouldn't be no different than having Paul George. You couldn't count on him most nights. There were nights where he looked like a superstar, and there's nights where Paul George looks like he's just a guy in the NBA. So, you telling me Norman Powell can't do the same thing? He can at least do the same thing. I personally think he would be a lot better. The only reason why I would push back, honestly, when Kawhi comes back, if Norman Powell is inserted in the starting lineup going forward, because the Clippers won't have nobody off the bench, a 6-man off the bench they really actually trust that can come in there and give them a spark when the starters sit down. And a lot of times when you look at, great teams are not top heavy only. Great teams have a good bench and they have a decent or a very good starting lineup. It's not one without the other. You got to at least have a decent bench. It don't have to be a great bench. It has to at least be decent. And I'm not saying the Clippers bench would not be decent if Norman Powell was in the starting lineup, but it's a whole lot better when Norman Powell is coming off the bench if you got Kawhi and James Harden in there, because it gives them more space to operate for one. And on top of that, it gives the Clippers a secondary option when Norman Powell comes off the bench. He can drop 20 plus points a night, even coming off the bench. So it's like, even though I like Norman Powell in the starting lineup, I still think it's probably best for him to go back to the bench, I guess, when Kawhi comes back, so they'll have like evenly distributed offense, from the bench to the starting lineup. When you sit players down and when the starters need to rest, you got somebody on the bench who can come in there and drop 19, 20 plus points, along with the additional points that anybody else gives you off the bench who's inserted. So, that's probably the best way to go. But even if Ty Lue decides to leave Norman Powell in the starting lineup, the Clippers are still going to benefit from that a whole lot. Honestly, now that I think about it, they might be up 25, 30 points some of these games with Norman Powell playing this way. Shooting efficient at that, which he's always been kind of somewhat of an efficient shooter, especially when he was on Toronto. Like he shot in the high 40s, low 50s every now and then, at periods during the season, seasons ago then. He may not end the season shooting 51%, of course, but he would, have moments in the season, a lot of moments in the season where he go through stretches of a 10 7 to 10 game stretch where he's shooting 50+% and actually benefiting the team in a way offensively that they wouldn't have if he wasn't there. So he can do the same thing for the Clippers. I just been very impressed by what he's been doing, and he's pretty much the reason why why the Clippers have been successful so far. And I know the Clippers don't have a winning record and all those type things, but the Clippers are currently in the play-in tournament, seeding wise, standings wise, which is, better than where they were about a week ago, because they was in like the 14th, 15th spot, about a week or two ago. But now they climb their way up to at least the play-in tournament, type scenario in regards to the standings. Now, I know it's really early in the season, so you can't really talk about that stuff too much, but we got to give credit where credit is due. Norman Powell's been playing great. You got to give Zubac some credit too. Zubac has been playing great. I thought he's been a big part of the reason why the Clippers have been, winning some games, lately. And just a collection of everybody. It's really a collection of everybody. Like I said, they got defense that can result in the offense, get them fast break points, get them easy baskets. They got guys who can knock down shots. They got guys who can defend perimeter and in the paint. They got Norman Powell who can drop 25+ points any given night, along with James Harden, who can go off and have a game where he goes off any given night. James Harden has given them 9-10 assists a game, so if you look at the team, honestly, they could have won more games than what they've had. Of course, if they had Kawhi Leonard, but the reason why they ain't win some of the games they lost this season so far within a 10-game stretch, they had to lead in some of those games. So like the second time I think they played the Phoenix Suns, I believe they had a substantial lead in that game. They just couldn't hold it because they didn't have that star player to drive the game home. They didn't have Kawhi. They didn't have that guy who could just put the nail in the coffin and we're moving on to the next game. That's the reason why. And like I said, Kawhi's presence is always missed because you're taking away offense and defense when you talk about him. And I can tell you the way this team looks right now with the defensive players they have and, the scoring that they have, the scoring ability that they have, if you add a Kawhi Leonard to this team, there's no reason why this team could not be looked at as a contender. It's no reason why, based upon what I'm seeing now. I mean, because like I said, everybody will be back in their natural position when Kawhi comes back because he suffices and makes up for all the mistakes that everybody else or all the flaws that any other player on the team has. And remember, they haven't even used Mo Bamba hasn't played yet. So there's another big body that they have not even been able to implement or use yet. So it's like you add him in there, another big body, get some extra rebounds, knock down a shot here and there. It makes a difference. It'll make a hell of a difference. And like I said, if Norman Powell can keep playing this way, maybe not play quite this way throughout the whole season, of course. I don't expect that. But, of course, when Kawhi comes back, his numbers are going to dip and go down because, Kawhi is back. But if he can give, the Clippers, a good 17 to 19 points per game, close to 20, I mean, that's not much different than what Paul George gave him. Paul George gave him 22 points a game last year. If Norman Powell averages 20, 21 points a game, you're not really missing anything because Norman Powell can definitely score like Paul George can. He can definitely put up numbers, hell, like anybody in the league, honestly. So, I mean, the Clippers really might be in a better position than what we think, and we just got to hope that Kawhi comes back healthy enough, quick enough, so they can build some chemistry and, keep it going because right now, even though they're not like, having a winning season, they're like 4-6 at the moment or something like that. Even though they're not like in the winning column, they still show a lot of upside. I think we got to give them credit for that. Got to give Norman Powell credit. Got to give Zubac, James Harden, even Ty Lue. Ty Lue, some of his coaching is questionable to me at times, but and it still is. But at the same time, he has these guys ready to play, and they're giving their heart. They're giving they're playing their hearts out for him, and that's all you can ask for, especially when you're shorthanded the way they are.